Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good evening. My name is Swazi, and you are logged in right now to My Life, My Stage quarantine question time. And so if you've logged in, grab your drink, because if you have not melted already, you are about to. We are about to have a very, very good conversation with the one and only Ed Davey in the building. And so grab your drink, grab your snacks. You need to sit down and join us for this conversation. This is My Life, My Say. You see, there's water there. You can see the water and you can see the bookcase. We're ready on this call, you know. My name is Swazi. I'll be your hostess with the mostess tonight. So yeah, if you've just joined in, make sure you get your questions ready. It's going to be a really, really good conversation. We're going to go live and start the kickoff in about a minute or so. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Swazi. I will be your hostess for your evening tonight. Welcome. If this is your first time logging into Quarantine Question Time, then a massive, massive welcome. But if you're a newbie and you're here and you've brought some friends, then welcome as well. It's so good to have you and so good to have so many young people logged in. This is Quarantine Question Time. This is the brand new digital space where young people get to have expert advice when it comes to the coronavirus. So make sure you've got your snacks. Make sure you've got your cup of water. We're going to go live in exactly 30 seconds. Good evening, everyone. My name is Swazi. I'll be your host for tonight. And if you've just logged in to Quarantine Question Time, then a huge welcome on this very, very hot August day. It's August in 2020. How have we got here? I don't know, but you need to lock in because we're about to have a very, very good conversation with the one and only Ed Davey in the building. And shouts goes out to Mark as well, who's doing a fantastic job of interpreting for us as well. So shouts goes to you, to Mark. Welcome to Quarantine Question Time, hosted by My Life, My Say, a digital space for young people to receive expert advice on issues that impact young people. This event is in partnership with #WillIWill campaign, and we also have received support from the National Deaf Children Society to make this Quarantine Question Time more accessible and a space where everyone can engage with as well. We are pleased to have live subtitles available for today's Quarantine Question Time, and if you would like to access them, just click on closed captions, which is usually at the bottom of your screen. A big welcome to Mark, our British Sign Language interpreter, and if you're using Mark, we suggest that you use the pin function just to make sure he is always visible on your screen. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this show takes place every week, usually on a Thursday, and please follow @MyLifeMySay on Twitter, on all of the socials, to take part in the conversation by using the hashtag QuarantineQT. We'll be following this hashtag for all the live questions and the comments that come from you guys. We want to hear from young people, so make sure you click through and engage with us. Before we kick off the event today, I would like to say a massive, massive shout out and invite Mete Koban, MBE, the CEO of My Life, My Say, to come on and say a quick few words about tonight's event.
Thank you, Swaz, and thank you, Sir Davey, for your time today. Just wanted to, say thank you to you all for joining our call. We really appreciate all the support that we've had since we've started this, Swaz. You remember when we first went into lockdown, I just picked up the call to you and I said, what are we going to do, about engaging all the young people who are likely to be forgotten during the COVID-19 pandemic, we're going to be the one who's going to have to pay the price for it. And, we've been very lucky to have been supported by so many and thousands of people, over the past few months. We've had some great speakers from America, from Hong Kong, from India, Brazil, all over the world. And, we're very delighted to be here also joined by our Leader Series as well, where we had Sir Keir Starmer and also now Sir Ed Davey as well. Two sirs on our Quarantine Question Time. But we really appreciate their time because, we really do want to make sure that young people's voices are heard. And thank you to Ed Davey for joining us today. And I really look forward to the event and hope you all enjoy it.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Mete. He's been on my phone like, Swaz, how are we going to do this? So seeing this all come together, a big shout out to Mete and the whole team behind My Life, My Say. So I do this every time we do a Quarantine Question Time. I do give a nice big old drum roll because we've got a very, very, very special guest in the building with us today, or on Zoom in this building. This week, we are joined by the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Swazi. Bit hot, but I'm looking forward to it.
I just need to check. This is not a virtual background. That's a real bookcase behind you.
Yeah. It's not my house, actually. I've come to my wife's mother's house, and because it's a bit more in the countryside, and we sort of put it up. So this is actually my late father-in-law's bookshelf. So
Wow.
I haven't read those books.
Yeah, I love the fact that you put the disclaimer there. I've got nothing. So in fact, knowing that your bookcase is 10 out of 10 gives me joy for this event. So thank you so much again for just joining us tonight. It was going to be so good to chop it up with you. And so yeah, just to give your intro really, you're the first leader to call for a public inquiry into the government's handling of COVID-19. Ed Davey has been campaigning on key issues including Brexit, climate emergency, local policing and trained services. He joined us today to discuss the latest on the coronavirus in the UK, his journey into politics, and will provide us with an exclusive perspective on what the future will look like for young people. Ed Davey will be taking a number of your questions and comments, and make sure you get involved. So Ed, before we dive in and I get all of these questions underway, for the young people who've locked in, I want to give some of the ground rules just so that we can get this show on the road. As you can see, young people, there's a few functions at the bottom of your screen, one of them being raise your hand. Throughout this event, you have the opportunity to make your own comments or ask your questions to the panelists. In order to do this and conduct this in a fair way and to allow everyone the opportunity to speak, you will need to indicate by clicking the raise your hand function at the bottom, and we'll call you up and unmute you so you can fire away and get your questions and your comments heard. There's also the feature of Q&A. If you prefer not to speak, that's absolutely fine. You can write your question down and type it into the chat box at the bottom, and we will take your question, and so that you can also be heard and have your say. And also the last function is live polling. We'll be practicing democracy in action here by giving you the opportunity to vote throughout the event. This will pop up on your screen and you will need to vote. We'll take the votes at the end of the show to just see where we sit. And so at every quarantine question time, we have a poll, and we would really love to know your thoughts. So the poll today, this is your question. What worries you most about COVID-19? What worries you most about COVID-19? This poll, there you go, jumps up onto your screen, and you've got a few options here. One being our economy, job security, the strain on the NHS, the health of family and friends, mental health, education, and racial inequality. So Ed, if you could choose the number one topic that you think young people will say, yeah, that's my number one worry that worries me most about COVID-19, what out of those options would you say would be number one?
It's a tough one between mental health and education. All the other stuff people are going to worry about, but I don't think enough attention is being paid to mental health or education. That's my view.
Okay, and any sort of, where have those two options come from? Out of that long list, how did you know to go for those two?
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of work, and my party, Lib Dems, has done a lot of work on mental health. And I just think it's the sort of untalked of issue in COVID. You know, they've got this committee of experts. They haven't got any specialists in mental health. And I don't think they're factoring it in to their planning and their thinking about stuff. So that's what worries me the most, probably.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Young people, get voting, man. That's your poll for today. What worries you most about COVID-19? All of those options are there, and we'll take your votes at the end of the show to see if mental health, if education, or if any one of those other options come up on top. So get voting, and we're going to start off this conversation. So, Ed Davey, I heard your career in the Liberal Democrats began just 6 months after you graduated from university. So one, I need to know what uni you're going to. And number two, this was due to you answering an advert in the Guardian newspaper. So yeah, give us your story. How did you get into politics?
Well, it's a long story, Swazi, because it actually began when I was a kid, because my dad died when I was 4. And then my mum became terminally ill when I was 12. And I nursed with my brother till she died when I was 15. And when you lose both your parents as a kid, it sort of has a big impact on your life and your thinking. That was a massive impact. And then the other thing that happened to me was I really got into the environment when I was about 18 or 19. I started reading a lot of books, started quite worrying about things. And I guess that family history and getting interested in the environment shaped my politics, shaped what I studied, how I thought, what I did. And I actually, when I graduated from university, I'd planned to go and become what I call an agricultural economist. I was going to work in developing countries, and that didn't come off. And I ended up just looking for a whole range of jobs. I went for a job with Friends of the Earth, and then I ended up with a job with the Liberal Democrats. Started work with them in January 1989. That shows how old I am.
Wow, what a story. And just, I want to say thank you for being honest and really walking us through, some of the high points, but also some of the low points. And I know there's a lot of young people watching who also care for parents, who also have had a rocky lockdown. And so, just your honesty and vulnerability there is really, really encouraging. I'm sure some of the questions will come through on that as well. Like you said, you were elected in 1997 and you've had a very interesting parliamentary career. You've held roles such as Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury in 2001 to 2002, all the way through to 2012, Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change. And you've just mentioned how much environmental issues matter to you as well. So out of all of the roles that you've had the pleasure of doing, what has been your favorite and what's been your greatest achievement to date?
Easy. When I was the cabinet minister, when I was in charge of energy and climate change, it was like a dream come true because I got into politics from the environmental movement and I fought like a tiger every day for renewables. One of the things that's really motivated me through my life was to try to get our power, electricity, our heat from the sun and from the wind. And my biggest achievement is I've signed off more contracts for solar and wind farms than any British politician. We nearly quadrupled Britain's renewable power when I was the cabinet minister in charge. And so that initial work that we did on climate change, Britain is now the world leader in offshore wind. That's probably my best achievement. Having said that, we've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go, but we made a bit of a start when I was the cabinet minister.
Yeah, that's a huge achievement. That's a really big achievement. And within the pandemic and in lockdown at the moment, are you finding that conversations around environmental change and climate change are as busy and are as booming before lockdown, or even more so now?
It's a good question because there's a lot of awareness, wasn't there? Because the young people's strike for climate was fantastic. I really like that. And then we had Extinction Rebellion. So awareness was coming up, and Greta Thunberg, and I was great. I was really enjoying that. And my only worry is the pandemic. Obviously, that's very, very serious. Though people have seen some of the positives in terms of nature, in terms of people not flying so much and going in the cars so much. I mean, one of the things I hope will stick with us for the future is what we're doing now. While it's nice to meet people in person, I'm a bit of a social animal. Nevertheless, people don't have to fly as much now, do they? Because they just can go on Zoom. I mean, in the past, people would jump on a plane. Well, that's quite damaging for the climate. And if we can reduce the amount of flights we all do, that will be brilliant as a step forward on climate.
Yeah, it's so true. A lot of the conversations and decisions that are being made now in lockdown are leaking through to some of the conversations that we're having before the coronavirus. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of decisions will definitely change. This is an extremely busy period for you, as it is for lots of people, and especially as you're running to be the next leader of the Liberal Democrats. So how is the leadership election going, and what made you want to run to be the leader?
Well, I've been in my party for 30 years. I've been in Parliament for 20 years. I've worked with lots of different leaders. And I lost my seat in 2015, but came back primarily because I was so cross about Brexit. I think Brexit is very bad for our country. I think it's bad for young people. I think it's bad for the action on climate change and so on. And I wanted to come back and do my bit in my party. And although, under Boris Johnson, I'm afraid Brexit may well happen, I still think Parliament needs people with experience on things like climate change, with experience of working in Europe, so that Britain can play its part. And I also feel my own story of someone who was a young carer, someone who actually wants to transform the way we care about people more broadly. I hope I've got a contribution. I mean, just to link it to COVID for a minute, Boris Johnson said, let's protect the NHS. But in my view, they forgot the care homes. And that's a tragedy. And I think we need to understand that you can't have a better health service unless you have a better care service. You've got to look after social care, whether it's care for the elderly, care for people with mental health problems, care for bereaved families. You've got to care for everybody and see that as part of the health service, not separate.
Do you, just on that point actually, do you find that your empathy level, given your background, given the way that life just dealt those cards to you at such an early age, do you find that empathy is a big drive to not only understanding people, but lead you in your politics?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think so. I mean, I do a lot of advice surges as a constituency MP where people come to me with their problems. Often it's about housing, either they're homeless or they've got poor housing, they're overcrowded, can't afford housing. Sometimes it's about benefits and money, they're in debt. And, when people are really struggling, you want to do your best for them if you can help them. And so, you know, if you really represent your constituents, that you need to be empathetic with them. You need to feel and understand that it's not their fault that they're having these problems. And I think that's important. And I think sometimes politics seems quite remote from people.
Yeah.
Actually, it's about people. It's just totally about people.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the way politicians like me debate it in the House of Commons on the media is a bit boring, because it looks like it's remote, and it shouldn't be, because it isn't. It's about real things and changing people's lives for the better. That's what it ought to be about.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. You really do. Yeah, thank you. And there's no sort of shying away from the fact that you may not be as 100% happy with how the government has kind of, just controlled, or how they've responded to COVID-19. And so you've called for an inquiry. So for those who may not be familiar with that, who've locked in, welcome again. This is Quarantine Question Time. We're jumping in with Ed Davey here. And so, let us know a little bit about why you called for the inquiry, and what is the inquiry all about?
Well, when COVID started, it was quite important that we all came together to try to work it, because I'm not going to blame Boris Johnson for the virus, right? It's not his fault the virus happened. And so it was important those first few weeks that we actually tried to support the government. But then as time went on, we became a bit worried that they weren't doing a very good job, and they'd made quite a few mistakes. You know, that they hadn't prepared properly, because they'd actually done a simulation. They'd done an exercise in 2016 about what would happen in a pandemic, and the report made all these recommendations, and they didn't do them. And then when they came initially, they took a long time to react, took a long time over, the protective equipment for NHS staff and care staff. They didn't look after the care homes. They've made so many mistakes, and I just think when something like that happens, it's so massive, you have to learn the lessons for the future.
Yeah.
It could be a second wave, could be another pandemic, and you need to hold people to account. Politicians, they say they're going to do stuff, and if they don't do stuff, then we should hold them to account, right? And that's what an inquiry is all about. And it has to be an independent inquiry. It has to be with a special legal framework, so they can't escape the questions. They have to produce the papers. They can't hide them. And then we can get to the bottom of it, and we can learn those lessons.
Yeah, and I would really love to pick your brains on this next question. And before I do, I'm going to say, Joao, who's a MLMS, My Life, My Say, young leader, he's about to jump on real soon and ask you a question. But before I do, I just want, there he is. Let me go to Joao next. No, you come back.
All right, okay, wait.
Hi, Joao.
Hang on, I'm back.
You're back. It's so good to have young people on the call. Give us your question.
Right, so hello, Sir Ed. Thanks for joining us again. My question to you, deviating slightly from the subject at hand. So I think a lot of young people especially, are feeling quite confused and unsafe in the midst of the ongoing debate surrounding the banning of LGBT conversion therapy. So given that Lib Dems are a party of inclusivity and progress, what is your stance on the matter, and what actions would you suggest should be carried out in regards to it? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think conversion therapy is appalling. As a liberal, people need to be who they want to be, and we need to respect that. And I believe in equality, and I don't care about your color, your race, your religion, your sexuality. It's irrelevant to me. You're a human being. Liberalism is about respecting individuals as who they are. And the idea that a group of people should try to say to someone, no, you say you're that, but we're going to convert you, I think that's abhorrent. That's wrong. I think it's immoral. And we should change the law to ban it, period. I'm not up for any compromise on this. It's got to be banned.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for your contribution. If you've just locked in, this is Quarantine Question Time. I'm your host, Swazi, joined by Ed Davey, who's from the Liberal Democrats. So we're chopping it all up about young people and COVID-19 and the impacts on young people. And just on your point, actually, about your inquiry, what's your thoughts about the news that's come out towards the ban of public transport being free for young people? Is that something that has come about because the government was slow to respond to COVID? We know that this is a financial decision. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's really going to hinder a lot of young people wanting to travel.
Well, it's already been raised in Parliament, and with my Liberal Democrat colleagues, Munira Wilson and Sarah Olney, we've been raising it. And it does look like it's financially driven, but I just think it's the wrong decision. And I think, we fought a long time and hard to get free travel for younger people.
Yeah.
And now to stop it, it just sends the wrong signal, it seems to me. And yeah, we know there are financial problems. Yes, there are, but they seem to find a lot of money, and they're wasting a lot of money. And I think letting young people down at the moment. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about mental health. I think there's a massive mental health issue here, and if you make it much more difficult for young people to move around, I think that's going to be a problem long term. And young people have actually behaved really responsibly on the whole during this pandemic. That they haven't spread it. They stayed at home when they've been told to stay at home. And I think when they're able to move, when they're allowed to move, to penalise them just seems the wrong thing. And I would rather see the government announcing some positive things for young people's mental health. So Liberal Democrats are arguing that at university there should be a student mental health charter. So actually, universities and colleges, when they've got young people who are away from home, maybe for the first time, or moving out of school where they've been for years, they may be that much more vulnerable. So make sure that there's a much greater support around them at that time. And another moment when people transition, when they're vulnerable, is if they've been under child and adolescent mental health services, which need a lot more funding, but if they've actually been getting some support, if they then move it to adults, that transition can be really, really difficult for a lot of people. And that has got to be much better managed. Otherwise, people fall through the gaps. So I'm calling for a massive, massive investment there.
Yeah. And I hope a lot of the inquiry that you're calling for as well really unpick some of those decisions. Because like you said, we want positive news. Young people, we want positive news to come from this, not that transport is going to be cut at all. So yeah, really good point. Want to shouts go out to Freya as well. Travel has not been free for young people outside of London ever, I think she says. Would be great to see a whole country moving towards free travel rather than it being stripped from London. Thank you so much, Freya. Also, you've got some good comments coming in from Stu, who says, one old person here, I'm sure not Stu, but a supporter of Ed Davey nonetheless. Thank you so much, Stu, for getting involved. Tonight, we're very much in partnership with I Will Ambassadors. So I'm going to welcome on Harry, who's also got a question for you, sir. Harry, are you there?
I am here. Hello.
Yay!
Hi, Harry.
I thought the video was going to freeze on me, but I'm here. Hey, thanks so much. Just to echo what's been said already, thanks so much for kind of taking the time to speak with you here. It's so important. So great to see you here. So my question is to ask, what can the Liberal Democrats do as a party that's outside of government to ensure that the voices of young people are amplified, both in local but also in national decision making, so that we're able to use our skills and give our insights to create a better world for everyone?
I just think that's so important. I mean, first of all, you'll know about things like the Youth Parliament. I'm a big supporter of the Youth Parliament. In my area, we have a member of the Youth Parliament. We have debates in schools and so on. That's one example of things that can be done. I think we need to go broader than that, though, and we particularly need to embrace technology. I think different platforms, not just like Zoom, but other things, can bring people in and make sure that everyone gets included, and we can actually debate in a more open way. So this is a bit radical, but hear me out. In the past, our democracy has been very sort of, you vote for somebody, they go away to the council, parliament, and then 4 years later you have another election. I think we need to engage electors and voters, including young people, in between elections, so their voice is heard in between elections. And there's lots of experiments going on in the world, in different parts of the world, where people's voices, especially young people's voices, are getting heard more. This is a really weird example, but hear me out. In Reykjavik in Iceland, capital of Iceland, they put a platform together called Better Reykjavik. And what it was it allowed people, citizens, especially young people, to put forward ideas of how they could improve their neighborhood, their road, their city. And then people would vote on those ideas, and the ones that got to the top, they'd go to the councillors, and they'd have to implement them. And over a decade, nearly everybody in the city took part at least once, and nearly 800 projects that came from ordinary people, including young people, were actually implemented. And that's what I'd love to see. I'd like to enable young people not just to be heard, but to see that they've been listened to and things have been done because they set them out. That's a richer way. That means that people feel that they're really involved and not just they're being, people have gone through the motions, the people are actually engaged. So that's the sort of democracy I'd like to see, a much more engaged democracy, a participatory democracy, where people are encouraged to really get involved and have a say and make a difference between elections.
Thanks so much. That's so interesting. I love that idea of kind of going from being kind of heard to then being involved. I think that's great. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you so much. Yeah, really good points there. And what would you say would be some of the barriers that young people need to overcome, or not just young people, but politics in general? I think lots of people are thinking, okay, this is really called not just my life, but the way I see life into question, much like you started off with, and thinking, okay, how do I get around this? So what are some of the barriers that young people are facing, do you think, from a political standpoint, that they can overcome in order to be involved with politics?
Well, this is going to sound very negative, so you're going to have to excuse me. Our political system isn't working very well. It's just not working very well. It's too centralised, so all the power's in Westminster and Whitehall, in Downing Street. It's not down in the communities, so individual communities and people aren't involved. So it's too centralised. It's not representative enough. Our electoral system is unfair, and I want to reform the way our votes are counted. I like the notion of fair votes, of make votes count. It's called proportional representation. I want to change our voting system. I don't want a House of Lords that, people who are born there or appointed there. I want you to be able to vote for them. I want to completely reform our democracy. I'm just not happy with our political system. And I think it excludes people, including young people, and the barriers are big. So that sounds quite negative, but I'm afraid it's one of the reasons I'm a Liberal Democrat and not in the other parties. I want to bust the system open. I know we may not seem it at times, but I feel we're quite radical, and I really want to reform the whole of British politics. We're sometimes seen, right, as the mother of democracies. Well, I'm sorry, go and look at other democracies, because we become complacent, we become arrogant in this country, or at least the people in power have, and they need to be brought down and realise that actually they're not representative, and they're not listening, and they're not involving people, and that's going to need political reform, big political reform.
Yeah, objectively speaking, this is not negative. I suppose it's straight facts. It's thinking, okay, where is the power all being held? What are some of those barriers? And so maybe to flip it on its head then and ask maybe a little bit of a radical question. If you were the PM, how would you consult with young people on their future and to find out the support that they need? Where are you getting your young voices when you are speaking to young people, and how would you consult them on their future?
Well, let me start with what I do now, because I go around schools, I go around colleges, go to universities, and listen to people. And it's always interesting. Young people, they don't always think the same as each other, first of all. Young people can have different views just like adults, right? And they do. It's good. And their views can change. So when I've been speaking to young people in my constituency in last 2-3 years, knife crime has come up a lot more than it's ever done before. And we've had two young, a black guy and a guy originally from Pakistan were stabbed to death in my constituency in the last 3 years. Had a big impact on people. So, you've got to always listen. You can't just listen and think, oh, I now know what young people think, because it will change. And you can't just go to one group of young people and think, well, they know it, they represent young people, because actually maybe in a different town, a different city, different group of people, different part of town, you'll get a different view. So the way you listen and involve young people has really got to be quite profound. It can't be just over the top. And it's why groups like My Life, My Say are so important, because you can be independent, you can be trusted third parties. So young people will trust you probably more than they would trust the Prime Minister. So what I would like, if I was Prime Minister, I'd want lots of groups like this to help me as Prime Minister find out what young people are thinking around the country, and try and put it together in a way which would enable me to help represent their views, and also help them take power for themselves. Because ultimately, I mean, again, this is going to sound slightly weird because it's a bit unusual to what most politicians say. I want power in order to give it away. What my biggest objective would be if I became Prime Minister was to reduce my own power.
Right.
Because I think that's been the problem. People have said, oh, I want to get into power and then I'll just do all this stuff. Actually, you should get in power to enable other people to do all the stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very different way of thinking about politics, but it's why I'm in the party I am, because I just think power is better exercised by ordinary individuals and by communities, not by people swanning it up in number 10.
And it kind of goes back to the point of empathy and humility and preferring one another and seeing someone else's needs before your own. And I think all of those things are top points when you think about politics, and maybe those gaps where that's not being done. That's why a lot of these problems do spring up. And it's so funny you mentioned My Life, My Say. I have to give it to Mette and the whole family behind My Life, My Say to really engage young people. They recently published a report about young people and COVID-19, and one of the key findings was that 73% of 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK believe that the coronavirus pandemic has had the biggest impact on them compared to any other social, political, or economic event in their lifetime. And many young people do not feel that the government is taking them into account when making decisions relating to this pandemic. So just hearing you say you want to bring in young people, you want to hear them, traveling to schools and universities, that's a really, really encouraging point. And you mentioned youth parliament. Maybe just want to say a few words on that. How can young people get involved with youth parliament?
Well, I think almost every area of the country, they operate elections for a member of the youth parliament, and they normally do it through schools. I think it's almost all through schools. So you'd probably have to do it through your school. But go on the website. They've got a great website, and you can learn all about it there. And it's depending on the area. But I've had some great conversations with my local member of the youth parliament, and what they do, they change every year. But why it's so useful is because they have stood on a platform. They've been talking to the young people, and they help me by talking to them. I'm talking to a lot of people essentially.
Yeah. It's kind of the gateway that you can actually just engage with lots more. This event is called Quarantine Question Time. Not only are we in partnership with IWAL Ambassadors, we're also in partnership with Molly as well. So Molly is here. I believe she's got a question for you, Ed. Molly from the National Deaf Children's Society, I believe, is going to ask you. Hey.
Hi.
Hi. With all the colours.
So my question is, as a deaf young person that works in retail, I know the importance of face coverings to keep us safe, but I know deaf customers need lip reading and also really struggling with staff using face masks. How should the government ensure that retail staff are trained in deaf awareness in order to support the deaf community as we come out of lockdown and return to day-to-day life?
Wow, what an interesting question. Molly, I'm not sure I know off the top of my head the answer, and I'd actually like to know what you think I should be saying to government. I'm happy to take the question up, but I'm not an expert. I mean, I do think generally speaking, people who are engaging with other people in retail or tourism, or there's people industries that are people facing, they need to be more aware of disability generally, whether people who have got hearing problems, whether they're completely deaf or they've just got a milder hearing problem, people with sight problems, physical disabilities, special needs like autism, all those sorts of things. I'm actually involved in a charity called Tourism for All, and it's a charity where we provide training videos for employers who are in the tourism and leisure industries, so they can train their staff to be more aware of different disabilities.
Okay.
Because people aren't very good at managing it, let's be honest with you, and little hints, little bits of awareness raising can dramatically improve their skills about how they interact with someone with a disability. And I guess with raising awareness for issues around deaf people, whether it's sign language, whether it's lip reading, that could be a really good way of training people. So I'm not an expert, Molly. You may well be, but if you've got some ideas that you'd like me to put to the government, I'd be very, very happy to do that. And whether it's training programs like I've been talking about that we've done in tourism sector, or whether it's, I don't know, some legal change, I'd be all ears for your ideas.
So for like where I work at the minute, so I like talk to my managers and stuff, discuss the next steps, because I'm currently furloughed because of the distance, and also because I'm scared to go back to work because I can't. Because I already have communication barriers, let alone this whole pandemic, and I've still struggled, but I still be able to battle through it. But this face mask thing just makes the whole thing unable to go forward in steps. You're basically going back.
You know, you're right. I was hearing about how some people who have autism, it really freaks them out and makes them really upset by having a face mask. So it's affecting quite a number of people, actually. And what that means is we all need to be aware of that. And, you know, if people are critical for other people because they're not wearing their face mask, or they drop it for a little while, they need to think a little bit. There may be a reason, a medical reason about disability that they've had to do that. And I think we just need to respect each other a bit more. And, you know, it's important that people do wear face masks, in my view, when they can. But if they can't, for whatever reason, then we need to have a little bit of flexibility, you know?
So for my work, we're discussing different means of protection. So face masks with little windows, you might have heard the campaign. That's like a really good idea, because that's better than a full covered face mask. But a little window, your lip is going against that window and there's no full facial expression. So for me personally, growing up as a deaf young person, I've been deaf since I've known, and I've had struggles and challenges and that, and I was able to fight, and my mum and my dad were able to fight with me. But what I worry more about is people who give dirty looks to someone and they're wearing a face mask, not because they're struggling, it's because they're getting forced to. But how can you stop them getting forced to? I feel like there should be some sort of guidance or a new law put into place to protect those people that are forgotten.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. Thank you so much. And you know what, Molly, just to encourage you, without your voice as part of the conversation, we just won't have ideas as good as yours, you know. We need your voice. So to encourage you, keep going, sis, like keep on using your platform. Because not just for My Life, My Say, or I'm sure even for Ed here, we need to hear you. We need to hear your community as much. So thank you, Molly, for your question, and keep on going, sis. We're rooting for you. She's so amazing. Molly there.
Absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely, I know. Even, but I love what you said. I'm not an expert. What do you think? How can I take some of your ideas and your suggestions with me into the rooms that you're going into? And that is a real, step of progress and leadership. So just your response. I hope a lot of people in politics have the same response, where they don't have the answer. They're happy to admit, you know what do you think? What ideas do you have? Do you find that a lot of politicians do that?
It varies. I mean, so don't know is all right, you know. I think I'd say that to everybody, not just politicians. How can everyone know everything? Particularly new things. This is a new thing. Like, we've never done COVID before. I've never thought of face masks before. How can we expect anybody to have all the answers?
Yeah.
And you know, if you're in government, the way when there's a new thing that comes along, you've got to ask people. You've got to be open. You've got to be willing to bring people in and listen. And the thing I worry about our political culture is sometimes it's a bit macho. It looks like you're weak if you're having to listen. Well, no, you're not. You're strong because you've got the confidence to say, I don't know stuff, and I'd like other people to give me their views. I mean, you know what's surprising about this? To me, that's like normal.
Yeah. It is normal. When you don't know something, you learn it, but actually people want to talk over one another.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've got a couple more questions for some of these speakers that are locked in on the line. Shouts goes out to everyone in the chat box as well. If you've got your questions, don't worry. We're going to do a speed round real soon of the Q&A, so stay there. I'm going to invite Janelle next, another ambassador from I Will. So yeah, Janelle, I would love to hear your questions, sis. Go ahead. You're on me. Oh no, you're good.
Hi guys.
Hi.
I just wanted to quickly just note that I was a youth MP, and to any of the listeners that want to get involved in Parliament, Youth Parliament is what it works in your like local council, and because of like lots of like youth cuts to youth services that the government have, it really does depend on where you live, which is really sad. If Youth Parliament is available to you. So yeah, defo check on your local council's website and you'll find out who represents you, how you can chat to them and stuff like that. But on to my question. My question is, what will you do about the increasing demand on CAMs due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, including the particular challenge of young people facing the reality of racial and social economic injustices?
Oh, that's such a good question. Do you know, for people who don't know what CAMS is, it's Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services. And Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services have been under real pressure way before COVID. In my constituency, when I talk to young people and to their parents and carers, some of them are waiting for 2 years to even be seen and be assessed. So there was a huge problem before COVID. COVID, I think, has made it 100 times worse, because I think people who had some mental health issues may well be worse. There'll be people who didn't have them who've now got them. And we're just not tooled up in this country. We need more people. We need to train more people to go into CAMS. They need to have a lot more resources to be able to perform and help people in need. We also need, I think, to be tougher on waiting times. I just find it weird that people expect that it's okay if you have to wait for 6 months when you've got a serious mental health problem. It's not okay. It's just not okay. And there's a buzzword that's been around for years, a buzz phrase, early intervention. Early intervention. What that says is, the sooner you are seen and you're getting help, be it therapies, counseling, whatever it is, the more likely you'll be able to not just deal with the symptoms, but deal with the causes and actually make people healthy. And that can completely change their lives. And there's other evidence which shows that a lot of mental health problems do start when people are young. And if they're not dealt with by early intervention, they stay with them through their lives. So I don't think there's many other things that are as important as investing in children and adolescent mental health services. You turn lives around. One of my best friends in politics, he's no longer an MP, but his name's Norman Lamb. Norman Lamb, he was the MP for North Norfolk. And Norman, and do look him up, he's done lots of stuff on mental health services. It's a shame he's not in Parliament now, because he was really very informed and thoughtful. And we just need people who are in leadership positions to keep arguing for more cash, more specialists, tougher waiting times so that people can get seen more quickly, and a culture which is about see the young person soon, because you know it's going to get worse if you wait for 6 months.
Do you think there should be incentives for like the government should offer for like university students to study like specifics on mental health, so that could be changed?
Well, we certainly need more people going into the different professions around mental health, because I think there's a shortage of them, and there's a wide variety of people who are in that in those professions. But it would be really good if more people were going in there, taking the right subjects, be they at GCSEs or A levels, or going to the right courses at college and university. And we need to find a way of doing that. I mean, maybe it's bursaries. There was a time when there was student nurse bursaries to get people to go into nursing, and the government took them away. And guess what? Fewer people went into nursing. Then we had a crisis in vacancies for nursing. The government's now trying to put right. Well, if it hadn't taken away the bursaries in the first place, they wouldn't be in the mess they were.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's that sort of approach that could make a big difference. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Janelle, thank you. And thank you for the plug in the beginning as well. Yeah, make sure you take her advice. And just on your point, actually, about education, both to Janelle and to Ed, we ran a poll. If you've just logged in, we ran a poll at the beginning of this event. And the question was, what worries you most about COVID-19? And Ed, one of your things that you highlighted was education as well. So just going through the Q&A, we're going to do a quick fire round for everyone who's typing away their questions. Kirsty Reed, just goes out to Kirsty. She's locked in. She says, Year 12 has been forgotten largely in terms of education, with very few proposed. Oh no, it's moved. Hold on, Kirsty, where you gone? Very few proposed. I've forgotten your question, Kirsty. Where is it gone? I think proposed alternatives in terms of being forgotten about, having, predicted grades taken in. And so she's asking, what do you think about that? What advice would you give to young people who, have had their education interrupted by the pandemic and not too sure how to go forward? Any advice for young people studying?
Well, you've got to engage with your school and your teachers. I think the vast majority of schools and teachers will be trying their very best for youngsters. I think the government have not been very good in this area, if you want my opinion. I don't think they've been clear. I've got a friend of mine who is actually the education minister in Wales, a lady called Kirsty Williams, and education is run separately in Wales to England. And Kirsty's been operating it very differently. She's been consulting schools, consulting unions, consulting parents, consulting local authorities before she's made any of her decisions, which is very different from what's happened in England. And as a result, she's done things have happened in Wales that haven't happened in England. So some of the young people who haven't had any schooling, a chance to go back to school to see their teachers in England, they've actually been able to go back in Wales. And they've tried to make sure every year group can go back and have a discussion, can get advice, and can have an interaction, not just on Zoom, but in a classroom.
Yeah. And
I think the solutions that they've adopted in England have just not been very smart. And I think people have been ignored. And it's not just year 12, absolutely, because they're thinking of the future and going on after school, but some of the other years lower down, and I'm quite worried and if you talk to head teachers, and I talk to my constituency particularly, they've become really annoyed that the government will make an announcement without having told them. And suddenly parents ring them up and saying, what about this announcement I've heard on the radio from the minister? And the school said, well, we've only just heard about it. I mean, that's just very bad way of governing, it seems to me.
Yeah, so even at a level of communication, it needs to be improved at that point as well. I love the fact that you've raised another Kirsty. So Kirsty Reed, you need to go check out Kirsty Williams. Go check out the work there, sis. And thank you so much for your question as well. I want to shout out Ruth Bradshaw. A really important point, and this is why we need young people's voices. She's making a point off of what Molly was saying, and says about the problem of deaf people being unable to understand other people because their mouths are covered by face masks. I've seen a picture of a face mask with a transparent panel in front of the wearer's mouth. Anyone who is dealing with the public ought to wear that kind of face mask so that they can be clearly understood by people with hearing impairments. Thank you, Ruth. That's a really, really good shout. I'll ask them, I'll ask my say also to just copy and paste and tweet that, because I think it's really, really important, an effective solution that we can do at this level before other solutions come about as well. So thank you from Ruth. We've got EC here. I like that name, EC, in the chat box, who asks you, Ed, how will Lib Dems ensure we have a green recovery from COVID-19?
Oh, my favourite question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is right up your street.
Well, I've actually produced a plan which I've published. I call it my Green Economic Recovery Plan, because, I think this is the economy is in a mess, right? And my background as an economist, my degree and postgraduate were in economics. I put myself through night school for my postgraduate. So economics is my subject, and so is the environment. So I've always seen them together, because I think if you're really going to change the economy and make it greener, you've got to go right to the heart. And so my Green Economy Recovery Plan, it's very, very big, much bigger than the government proposal. It's £150 billion in 3 years. And it's about green homes. So you're really insulating massive scale in every village, town and city, creating jobs, tackling fuel poverty so heating bills go down. So big thing on refurbishment in homes, massive on green transport. You know, we've got to tackle air pollution that's hurting people's health. We've got to tackle the climate, and you know, we need that green transport. Yes, walking and cycling, and to be fair, the government done some stuff on that, but we need those electric vehicle charging points. You know, we need to really think differently about our transport. And power and electricity, which is my big thing. I want more wind farms. I want tidal power. So we're not putting dirty stuff in the air to get our energy. And I think, you know, if we did this big program, I think it would make a massive difference.
Yeah, amazing. EC, thank you so much for your question. That really hit home, really hit home. I've just looked at the time and we are about to run out of time. So before we do, and before we go over to the polls, I'm going to hand it over to Tommy Shaw, who's got a question for you, Ed. Tommy Shaw, what's happening? I think Tommy's going to jump up. Hey,
yeah,
there he is.
Hey. So it's my first time doing this because I missed the last one.
You're a pro.
Go on, Tommy.
So my question for you is, if you were the Prime Minister, how would you evaluate funding to help strengthen Britain, you know, in the times that we're in now? And then the other question I had was, what would make you different from the Prime Minister Boris now, or what would you do differently to what he's doing now?
Well, Tommy, the two questions come together, because when you think about public spending, the question is, what are you spending it for? And in the way that we've been doing this country, we've not really thought about what the real outcomes are. And the real outcomes for me are the well-being of our people. And there's a new strain of economic thinking, which you've seen other countries, particularly New Zealand, have gone for, where they put well-being of people at the heart of their economic policy. And that includes, by the way, the environment. And if you look at how you judge spending and you do your economic and finance and your budgets, and you do it from a well-being of the people, you suddenly see some big changes. And Jacinda Ardern, who's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, has done this, and 2 or 3 things have happened. First, they spent a lot more on mental health straight away. When they started looking, what is the thing that if we spend a bit more money, it will make the biggest difference? Mental health. Second thing, looking after the victims of domestic abuse, whether it's through violence or children, young people are being abused, because those people who are suffering, we need to help them quickly and properly and in a probably sustained way. And so I'll give you those 2 examples of things that have actually happened in other countries which have done what I'm saying. And I don't see that from our government. I don't see them saying, okay, what we want to think about is the well-being of our people.
I think as well, sorry.
Yeah, go on, Tommy, you go on.
I think as well, like, because my mum was in the domestic violence situation, and I think it's like the afterwards that affects most people. It's where you know, like, because she had PTSD, and it affects them afterwards because they can't, you know, physically stop thinking about it. It's like anything they see, or what's, you know, like a smell or a memory of something.
That's right, Tommy. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you.
It's much bigger than people think. And when you sit back and you look, how can we make people have a happier lives, more fulfilling lives, solve some of the pain that they've gone through? Well, you start doing things differently.
Yeah.
I mean, when I became acting leader of the Lib Dems, my first question was actually about bereavement, because as I said earlier, I was bereaved as a kid. And what's annoying me about this government, they made changes to support for bereaved families where someone's lost a mum or a dad and their kids, and they've really cut back on that. And I'm very cross about that, because those families are going through turmoil. Often, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's quick or slow, but sometimes a very quick death and not ready for it. And it can be dramatically change their financial circumstances.
Yeah.
And you know what? They weren't even giving support just because the parents weren't married. You didn't get any support just because you weren't married. in really mad things. And we've got to change that. And you change it if you take a basic position which says, let's look after people. Let's care for people. Let's look after their well-being. And suddenly, things which seemed difficult before become a lot more obvious and more and easier to do.
Yeah.
And it is about priorities, and we get the wrong priorities.
I was just going to say, actually, when that is the main priority, everything else seems to slot into place because people do come first. Tommy, thank you so much. You're a pro at asking that. I hope you're going to lock in again next time because we need these questions. And thank you for your honesty, Tommy. Honestly, yeah, it really helps move the conversation forward. So thank you.
Thank you for letting me be here.
You look like you've got a little ray of sunshine in your top corner as well.
I know. I've literally, I tried logging on earlier, because I got a special invite and it just wouldn't seem to let me. It just wouldn't let me do it. And then I tried using my Wi-Fi and then it let me do it. So I've been sat in the sun all day and it's really hot. I'm really hot. I've had to have my fan on.
Thank you, Tommy. Right, we've got a couple minutes to go before we wrap up the show. At the beginning of the conversation, we asked you guys a poll. We gave you a poll, and the question was, what worries you most about COVID-19 as young people? What do you think is going to be the #1 pick? And so we've got some of the answers come in now. Ed, I know you said mental health and also education, so I can reveal. Ed, you are right. 25%, the highest percent said mental health. Not far behind, though, the health of family and friends, which, funny enough, of course, is going to feed into mental health. 19%. And closely behind that is the strain on the NHS, 13%. But education, 13% also up there as well. So, yeah, you're not far off. Mental health and education and the health of family and friends definitely take #1 place. So you're not really too shocked about those results.
No, not really. No.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's not close. It's quite close to what I'd have done. So I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much as well to everyone who's locked in. This is Quarantine Question Time. My name is Swazi. It's in partnership with My Life, My Say, I Will Campaign, and so many people who have logged in, got their questions answered. But of course, we want to say a massive and special thank you to Ed Davey. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and also your honesty.
So, Swazi, listen, thank you for having me. Thank you to My Life, to My Say, to I Will Campaign, to everyone who's been involved in putting this together. It's been a privilege to be on it. And if you've got any follow-up questions, do send them in. So if Molly's ideas, she's got things she wants me to take forward, get in touch.
I do have to say, actually, this has to be one of the most empathetic conversations I've had the joy of hosting. And just what you said, if I could encourage you, what you said about looking as though your listening is a weakness, but you corrected that straight off the back and said, no, that's a top strength. And I so agree with you. Politics aside, when people come first and you're able to listen and learn from others, I really do believe that progress happens like that. So you've been a real joy to interview. Thank you so much, Ed. To Molly as well, to Ruth, I'm going to tweet what you said, Ruth, about the face mask, because I think that's an A1 solution. Want to shout out the National Deaf Shield Society with Mark as well. Shouts goes out to Mark, doing a fantastic job of interpreting. And to all the young people, get involved on the socials, at My Life, My Say. I'm on socials, at Swazi McKelly. Get your questions in. We would love to take them up and continue the conversation. So Quarantine Question Time will be back real soon. Check the socials. And massive thank you again to Ed and to everyone involved. Take care. See you soon.
Bye. Cheers.